So low minerals also. So we talked about high minerals, high iron, high copper, but also if you have low levels of certain minerals. So specifically magnesium, calcium, sodium, potassium, those 4 macro minerals, those are huge for painful periods and endometriosis, as well as low antioxidants. So vitamins A, C, E, and selenium. Those are really, really important. So we're looking at making sure we don't have too much of certain minerals, as well as making sure we have enough of certain minerals and vitamins. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync, the podcast for looking to have a safe and confident transition off birth control and heal their hormones naturally. I'm so glad you are here and tuning into this episode because I'm going to be breaking down the root causes behind your hormone symptoms. And I wanted to talk about this and dedicate a whole episode to this because I have so many women coming to me, understandably so. I want to say that first, right off the bat, understandably so, dealing with painful periods, irregular periods, heavy bleeding, mood swings, PMS, anxiety, acne, other skin conditions. And we've been taught that those things are hormonal, right? Of course, our period's going to be hormonal. Of course, having mood swings around certain times of the month is going to be hormonal. Of course, acne is going to be hormonal. We're taught those things, and there's so many additional layers to that. So I've used this analogy before, and I'll say it again if you haven't heard this, of like hormones are the tip of the iceberg. What's underneath is gut health, mineral status, inflammation, detox capacity, nervous system, stress, all these different layers. And hormones is what it's like kind of the last phase. It's like what we see or what peaks. So this is why I don't run hormone testing as a first course of action, because it's not going to give us any information I don't already know. If you stop birth control and your periods are painful or you're experiencing anxiety or acne, I already know your hormones are imbalanced, right? You've been on birth control for so many years. Or if you've not been on birth control, or, this is something that, birth control isn't a piece of your journey and you're still experiencing hormone symptoms, it's the same thing. I already know that your hormones are off, that the hormone testing isn't going to give me new information. It's more of what's driving those hormones, what's causing that hormone imbalance to begin with. So I wanted to create an episode really diving into what those root causes are and give you some more clarity around your symptoms besides just the, oh, it's hormonal, go back on birth control, or oh, it's hormonal acne. It's something that you have to take like chasteberry or something to help with your progesterone, or, just take DIM to detox estrogen and support detox with painful periods. No, there's so much more to all of these things. And I will say that there are usually multiple root causes leading to hormone imbalances to begin with. So I'm also going to go over the main tests that I run, the functional lab tests that I run that can help you identify, exactly which of these root causes are contributing to your symptoms. So there are usually 7 main root cause buckets. So we have mineral and nutrient depletion, so vitamin and mineral depletion. We have blood sugar and insulin dysregulation, gut health and microbiome balance, liver and detox capacity, overall thyroid and metabolic health, stress, nervous system, and underfueling, and then environmental exposure. So think like mold, heavy metals, halogens. We'll talk about those things in details if you don't know what these things are. And like I said, most women have a combination of these things, which is why functional lab testing is so helpful, because it gives you clarity of like, you're not just going on a gut cleanse or a gut detox because you feel like, oh, I have a parasite, that must be what's causing my acne, or, I'm eliminating sugar and that must be helping with my inflammation. It's like, no, you know exactly what root causes you're identifying and what you need to be doing to correct those. So overall, this will save you so much time, so much money, and so much energy because you have that clear answer. So I want to first start with acne potential root causes. And I'm going to do a high level overview of these things because I have specific episodes on these, as well as a free resource, which if you make sure you stay to the end or look in the show notes because you have that resource, but a high level overview of all these symptoms. So acne. Acne is one that is so multifaceted. I mean, all of these are, but I think just because I've had personal experience and my acne was particularly sticky, I've seen just how complex of a skin condition this is. It's not just about your gut or your hormones. It's much deeper. So acne root causes can be anything from, there could be bad bacteria in there, but there could also be low levels of beneficial bacteria. It could be gut infections, poor gut, what's commonly referred to as leaky gut, which is where your intestinal lining, it should be tight junctions, but when there's stress or certain medications like birth control can weaken those and cause, if you see me in my video right now, I have like my tight junctions in my fingers, think of like a fence, but when it becomes leaky, those pull apart and there's like holes in the fence. And so things that were supposed to stay within the fence, were supposed to stay within the intestines, they leak out into the bloodstream and that can cause inflammation. So that can cause acne. And then one that's rarely discussed and is a contributor to all of these things, but I see a lot with acne, is low stomach acid. So poor absorption of protein and minerals. So even if you're eating super, super healthy, which most of my clients are, they're still experiencing acne, it could be because they're not digesting or absorbing the nutrition from that food properly. We also have iron overload, high copper, low minerals like zinc and selenium, which act as antioxidants. Vitamins A, C, and E are big here, and low iodine, especially if you have acne around your jaw or your mouth or like touching your mouth. That's a big one. I used to have those. They were so, so painful. I see low iodine here so, so much because if basically iodine, we don't eat enough of it. We don't get enough iodine. It's mostly in seafood and seaweed. And if you're in the US, you probably aren't eating those like every day. And then we also have competing halogens, which if you think back to the periodic table, there's iodine, there's bromide, I forget which one it actually is, and then there's fluoride and chloride. And so we have competing halogens. So like bromide is in, I'm like forgetting which one that is. It's either bromine or bromide. I'm like blanking on it, but that is in flour. We have fluoride in our water and fluoride in toothpaste. So that's why I always recommend getting a fluoride-free toothpaste. I like Boca brand a lot. And it's also, we have chlorine in pools. And so we have a lot of competing halogens, which blocks iodine. So then iodine can't get into the cells. And iodine is so important for detoxification. It's so important for skin health, for hormones. It's truly a miracle mineral, and no one's talking about it. And so we are just like drinking fluorinated water. We are, using the toothpaste. We're eating baked goods with bromine in them and swimming in pools. And so that's like such a common occurrence that we're just blocking iodine. And when, for example, fluoride, it gets stored in the teeth, that's why we can have the chin, jaw, and mouth acne. And so it really grinds my gears when I hear estheticians specifically talking about like avoid iodine, because it's like that is so misguided. You actually need iodine. And I also get personally triggered when people are like, oh, your acne is hormonal, because that's exactly where my acne presented. It was below my nose. So it was just my chin and my jaw. And like everything online told you that was hormonal. And it's much deeper than that. Like, yes, again, the iceberg, hormones play a role in that, but it also is like all these other systems. And so I made the mistake of focusing on the hormone side of things. Like I did hormone testing, I took like supplements to balance my hormones, all those things, and none of it worked because I wasn't getting to those underlying layers, including iodine. Okay. And then detox issues. So sluggish, overloaded liver pathways, or, poor bile, that equals poor estrogen clearance, and also detoxing. That also is, if you aren't, having a bowel movement every single day, then that can contribute to detox issues as well, because you're not detoxifying through that pathway. And then mold, heavy metals, things like that, because that can cause inflammation. And then we have blood sugar and nervous system. So dysregulated blood sugar and insulin resistance, chronic stress or trauma. This is one that is very underrated. And then yo-yo dieting. A couple other ones we have for acne are pore clogging skincare. So even clean ingredients. This is something like definitely check your ingredients. I have other episodes with estheticians on here about, making sure not only your skincare products, of course, but also your makeup, your shampoos, your conditioners, even your detergent are free of pore clogging ingredients. The next thing we have is missing or irregular periods. And I grouped these into 3 main categories. So I did hypothalamic amenorrhea, PCOS, and then brain ovary communication issues. So the first one is hypothalamic amenorrhea, and this is from undereating or unintentional undereating. This could also be from overexercising or intense exercise, especially when coupled with undereating. However, there is research showing that if you're eating enough calories, but you're exercising past your needs, then that can cause hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is essentially what hypothalamic amenorrhea is when your body knows it doesn't have enough energy to essentially have a period because it's not safe enough to conceive. It's not safe enough to house a baby. And so it's something where your body slows its metabolism down, it slows everything down and cuts up that communication with your brain ovary HPA axis because it is unsafe from underfueling and overexercise in whatever way. Restricting specific categories of food. So I see a lot of women who are, the trend right now is protein, protein, protein. And so we tend to restrict carbs and fats. And there's also a big emphasis on, being lean and counting calories too, and staying below a certain calorie amount. So all of those things, carbs and fats are really, really important for healthy, balanced hormones. They're like the king and queen, or like queen and princess, whatever, of balanced hormones and regular periods. And so I can't tell you how many women I've had where we just focus on bumping up their nutrition intake and bumping up their carb and their fat intake, and their body, they feel so much better. They have so much more energy. And they also have regular, consistent periods without anything else, right? Without hitting their exercise, without anything else, just focusing on increasing calories and those macronutrients can be so, so helpful. Clean eating taken to the extremes, because this oftentimes results in people restricting specific foods and nutrients and calories in general and just not eating enough. And then mental, emotional trauma. This is stress on the body. So going back to, if your body doesn't feel safe enough to conceive, you're not going to have a real period. And I will say I see hypothalamic amenorrhea a lot in post-birth control syndrome, because a lot of women were put on birth control for a missing or irregular period without doctors digging deeper, anyone digging deeper into, well, why is your period missing? And they lost it from, they were really active in sports, they weren't fueling enough, they had an undiagnosed eating disorder, they dieted, and that can result in low hormone production overall, which can lead to hypothalamic amenorrhea. So they get on the pill, they have what they think is a period for years, and then they come off and they're like, well, why is my period missing, right? Like, I had one on birth control, why is it not back? And so there's a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration with that. And then we have to really dig deeper into the relationship with food and provide a lot of education on how to fuel our body properly. And then, that can help improve the relationship with food. It can help their body feel safe, and it can restore their normal, natural period. The next category with missing or irregular periods is PCOS. And the common thing people are told with PCOS is lose weight, restrict your carbs, regulate your blood sugar, intermittent fast, exercise. Those are the common things. Or take birth control to get a period, kind of like the hypothalamic amenorrhea case. And PCOS is more than just an insulin problem or a carb issue or a high testosterone issue. It's a whole body diagnosis, right? So yes, there is high insulin. Yes, there's dysregulated blood sugar, but there also could be stress in the gut, which is fueling the PCOS. So this could be overgrowth of bad bacteria. This could also be low levels of good bacteria I see quite frequently, as well as low stomach acid. Because again, you're not digesting and absorbing the nutrients from the food. And that can cause stress on the body because you don't have those raw materials to regulate blood sugar to fuel the cells. There's also iron overload that we can see in PCOS, which is where iron is stuck in the tissues, and this can cause inflammation. Thyroid issues. So thyroid issues go hand in hand. Usually there's sluggish thyroid in those with PCOS, which is essentially metabolism. And this goes back to if you're not absorbing nutrients, like if you're not absorbing, vitamins and minerals that your thyroid needs, or if you're low in iodine, for example, which is really nourishing to the thyroid, then that can be a huge driver of PCOS. And the stress piece too. So mental, emotional, and physical stressors. So, we can lump dieting in here because a lot of women with PCOS, not all, but a lot of women with PCOS have been told restrict carbs, lose weight. And then that gets them on this train of underfueling and over-exercising, which in and of itself is a stressor. And that's actually, negatively impacting their insulin resistance, their hormones, all of that kind of thing. With the brain-ovary communication, this is specifically after someone has had physical trauma to their brain, which negatively impacts the communication between the brain and the ovaries, which if someone is, they don't have PCOS, they are eating enough, they aren't over-exercising, their stress is controlled for the most part, this is when I start to think of this. So I never jump to the brain. Most of the time I'm looking at hypothalamic amenorrhea first, and then more of a PCOS picture depending on the labs, and then this. So when everything else is ruled out, we're looking at, is there an issue? Is there a signaling misfire or lack of communication between the brain and the ovaries? So this is common after concussions, car accidents or whiplash, sports injuries, repeated head injuries, and significant nervous system trauma. So again, this is something I don't jump to, but I wanted to mention it here because if you're looking at the hypothalamic amenorrhea and the PCOS and you're like, I don't identify with any of these things, then it might be more of this communication issue, which can lead to missing or irregular periods. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have painful periods and endometriosis, potential root causes. So first off, in that mineral category is iron overload is common here as well. So for both PCOS and for endometriosis and for acne, iron overload can be a potential root cause issue because the iron we have too much of it, or it's stored in the tissues versus in the blood where it needs to be. And this is where it can cause inflammation. This is why I am such an advocate of getting a complete iron panel, not just ferritin, not just serum iron. We're looking at the whole iron recycling picture and also where iron is being stored, as well as other cofactors that impact, or other nutrients rather, that impact iron recycling. So like copper, vitamin A, vitamin C. Because I can't tell you how many women they are, especially when they have a heavy bleeding or heavy flow, they're told, well, take an iron supplement because that's why you're fatigued, that's why you're tired, but that's fueling the fire here. So because they're taking iron because maybe their ferritin was low or their serum iron was low, but they didn't get that whole iron panel, when what they really have is an iron overload picture or an iron recycling issue where the iron isn't where it's supposed to be. And again, that can cause inflammation. So we want to make for sure we're looking at the whole complete picture, which is why I run a complete iron panel on my clients when I'm doing blood labs. Someone could also have high copper as well, which is another mineral. It's really, really important to have adequate copper. It's very essential for skin health, for nervous system health. But if you have too much of it, inflammation. And this is when I see a lot with painful periods, is this high copper, especially after birth control, because there's a unique connection between estrogen and copper. So if someone's been on estrogen progesterone combination pill for a period of time, they've been having artificial estrogen in their body for so long, and that can build up. And then you layer on birth control, your detox pathways are sluggish because of the effects of birth control. So they can't detoxify that estrogen, and then that can correlate to copper building up in your system as well. So we'll talk about copper with the next the mood anxiety piece as well. But this is huge for painful periods as well as endometriosis. So some of my clients with, going back to iron for a second, but some of my clients, when we see true iron overload, they might need to donate blood. So I have a client with endometriosis who we were working on transitioning her off of birth control, and she had iron overload, like very clear picture. And so we worked on her iron recycling system, getting her vitamin A up, vitamin C, copper, etc. But I did recommend she donate blood because we just needed to get that iron out of her system, because it was, it was going to cause painful periods coming back in endometriosis flares. So low minerals also. So we talked about high minerals, high iron, high copper, but also if you have low levels of certain minerals. So specifically magnesium, calcium, sodium, potassium, those 4 macro minerals, those are huge for painful periods in endometriosis, as well as low antioxidants. So vitamins A, C, E, and selenium. Those are really, really important. So we're looking at making sure we don't have too much of certain minerals, as well as making sure we have enough of certain minerals and vitamins. Estrogen and detox processing for painful periods in endometriosis. So if someone has poor estrogen, poor estrogen detox, aka estrogen dominance, that can be a piece as well. So I have a lot of people who it's not just they have high estrogen. That's what we've been taught. And that's why a lot of women with painful periods in endo are, taking DIM or calcium D-glucarate or things like that. But we want to make for sure it's not just that we have too much estrogen. It's like, how are we detoxing it? So this I assess, not only we can look at this with hormones, but we can also look at this in the gut too, because you have an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, which essentially packages the estrogen up and gets it ready to be shipped out in the stool. And if there's an issue with that, then it means you're not detoxifying your estrogen adequately. So, if you have sluggish liver pathways, also if you have low iodine or halogen exposure, which we talked about with the acne piece, then this can inhibit estrogen detoxification. So, like we talked about with the copper, when estrogen rises, copper rises. When estrogen and copper rise, iodine decreases. And as I said, iodine is really a big nutrient needed for detoxification and for just inflammation overall. Another thing you want to look out for is high xenoestrogen exposure. So this is why it's really, really important to get, not use heavily scented products like perfumes or lotions, to check your candles and make for sure that they're non-toxic. Those things can really add up. And I always tell people, just start small. I like using the EWG website it helps you rank your products, the Environmental Working Group. It helps you rank your products on, how toxic essentially are your products, anything from cleaning to makeup to skincare to shampoo and conditioners. And then you can look for products that are cleaner and that have less of those xenoestrogens. Okay, let me back up in case you don't know what xenoestrogens are. So xenoestrogens are synthetic man-made chemicals that mimic estrogen in the body. So they can bind to estrogen receptors and disrupt your hormone balance, especially when you have chronic exposure. So if you're using the same perfume every day or the same body wash every single day. So this is something that it can increase total estrogen and interfere with detox pathways. And this can also disrupt ovulation, progesterone, imbalance that, and cause inflammation and insulin resistance. So that's what a xenoestrogen is. Essentially, it's a chemical that mimics estrogen and binds to estrogen receptors to disrupt overall hormone balance. Next is gut and immune system. So gut infections or dysbiosis or low levels of beneficial bacteria. High histamine responses too. Histamine is a naturally occurring chemical in your body that acts as a signaling molecule. So it plays a role in brain function, immune response, inflammation, digestion, a lot of different things. And it's not bad. We need histamine, but the problem comes up when there's too much histamine circulating. So I look for, high or low histamine levels in my clients because, histamine can, when there's too much of it, you can have symptoms from it because it can cause anxiety. It can cause PMS, worsening periods, skin issues, headaches, itchy skin. And estrogen and histamine often amplify each other. So estrogen increases histamine. Histamine can stimulate more estrogen production. So you can see how there's so many different, interconnected dots with these things. But we want to make for sure that histamine is under control. Otherwise, your body can have an inflammatory response, high copper, estrogen dominance, gut dysbiosis. And then nervous system and making sure you're eating enough. So under eating or restrictive dieting can fuel painful periods. If someone has insulin resistance or blood sugar swings, I just had this in a client of mine. We started out and she had really low fasting insulin and history of an eating disorder. She was eating very clean. So she was unintentionally underfueling, lots of vitamin and nutrient deficiencies. And she had some candida, which was, an example of someone who had a lot of different things going on. So we worked on all of those things, and then we did some retesting and her blood sugar went up, and she had high fasting insulin, which her periods were controlled for a while, and then she started having symptoms again. So we reran some blood labs and her fasting insulin went up, which I have seen that when someone who's been chronically underfueling, they start refueling properly, their blood sugar has just kind of been all over the place. So it doesn't really know how to regulate itself. And so this is the benefit of doing some retesting, and really it gave us more guidance on okay, we have to focus on this now. This has changed because health is never stagnant. It's always going to be ever changing, right? So, this is a good example of rerunning these labs can give us data on what to focus on, what needs support. And then environment and metabolic, so heavy metal exposure, mold exposure, and also thyroid dysfunction as well. So slowing of the thyroid is, that impacts your metabolism, which essentially impacts your entire body. And then last but not least, I want to talk about mood swings, PMS, anxiety, and irritability root causes. This is when I've been hearing a lot in my DMs and in women reaching out to me to work together. So I think this one is so important because so many women are dealing with anxiety and irritability and mood swings and just not feeling like themselves. And they're being told, just go on anti-anxiety medication. Your blood lab, your labs look normal. It's just who you are. And they start to doubt themselves. They start to feel like, well, I guess I'm just someone who's anxious all the time, or I guess this is just a me thing, or I guess this is just how I am now. And there are so many root causes to this, especially when you add birth control in the mix, because it literally changes your brain. And most women have a history of birth control use, even if it's been years. This can still, if you don't address the root causes, this can negatively impact your mental health and emotional well-being. So starting with the first bucket of mineral and nutrient patterns, high or low copper can be big here. If you have high copper, inflammation. If you have low copper, you don't have enough of that copper for brain balance, essentially. It's needed. You need to have a balance of this. And this is not something that anyone is testing. But again, I see a huge correlation too. I see a lot of women with low copper. I see even more women with high copper because I see, mostly women coming off of birth control, and there is that estrogen copper connection there. If someone has low zinc, so zinc is a really, really important mineral for mood, for energy, same with B vitamins, and just low minerals overall. So minerals are important for building stress resiliency. So giving our cells what it needs for healthy cellular health and being able to manage stress that comes our way on a cellular level. This is really important because if you're so depleted, your body just can't function. It's in survival mode all the time. And so when I'm talking to women about stress support, I'm not just saying stress less. That's some of the most frustrating things you can hear when you're stressed out. It's how can your body manage stress? So building up your stress resiliency through restoring mineral balance is really, really important, especially specific minerals like calcium and magnesium. Those are more calming, but also sodium and potassium because those impact those impact stomach acid. And if you don't have enough stomach acid, right, we've talked about this in the previous sections, you're not absorbing the nutrients like the B vitamins or the zinc from the food. And if you have low antioxidants, this can cause inflammation and inflammation in the brain too. Methylation and histamine. So if someone is under or over methylating. And essentially what methylation is, it is a biochemical process that happens billions of times per second in your body. And if we get really sciencey, it's the transfer of a small chemical group, a methyl group, onto another molecule to turn something on, off, up, or down. So methylation affects neurotransmitters, so like your serotonin, your dopamine, your norepinephrine, gene expression, detox, histamine breakdown, ovulation, DNA repair. And so for women who are dealing with anxiety or mood issues, methylation plays a huge role because it also converts estrogen into safer metabolites and supports phase 2 liver detoxification. So we want to make for sure that we have the right nutrients to support methylation. So those B vitamins, zinc, magnesium, choline. And if methylation is off, then it can result in mood symptoms like anxiety, depression, irritability, those types of things. So this is something that I look at methylation status when I'm running functional blood labs and when I'm also looking at the HTMA picture in relation to someone's symptoms. So quick case study here. I had a client who she was struggling with so much anxiety, just so much overwhelm. She was a mom of 3 and just could not deal. And it specifically hers correlated with the week before her cycle. And she told me, she was like, I just want to run away and hide. And like, I'm snapping at my husband, I'm snapping at my kids, and then I'm crying in the bathroom 10 minutes later because that's not the type of person I want to be. Like, that's not the mom I want to be. That's not the partner I want to be. But I just snap in those moments. And we found she had low histamine. She had high homocysteine, which both of those things equal poor methylation. And she also had low B vitamins and low zinc. So she was just really depleted overall. And that indicated she had functional folate deficiency depression, which coincides to she doesn't respond to SSRIs because she was on Lexapro and her doctor had just told her, like, get on Lexapro, go on a different type of birth control, but none of those things helped. And that's because functional folate deficiency depression it's resistant to SSRIs. Those aren't going to work. And there wasn't that, even though it happened at the same time of her cycle, there wasn't a major hormonal component. It was nutrient driven or lack of nutrient driven. So I want to share that as an example. She had so many blood labs run. She had, tried all the different medications. She had seen a therapist and worked on all those things and nothing was changing. And her anxiety was just getting worse. Her overwhelm was just getting worse. And that's because she didn't have this data to focus on the specific nutrients as well. So once we started doing that, she saw results immediately. Like within a month, her next period was better. She didn't have any mood swings. She was happier. Her mood was more stable. And it was all from focusing on the right supplements, the right food. We also, when we look up mood, we want to look at gut status too, or gut health, because there's a huge link between the gut and the brain. So if there's any gut infections or inflammation, poor nutrient absorption, that low stomach acid, those things can contribute to a poor mood as well if we have any of that leaky gut, because that can leak. Those products can leak into the blood and that can go to the brain and cause inflammation. Blood sugar and stress. So if there's any insulin resistance or blood sugar swings, because that's added stress on the body, unresolved trauma, sluggish liver detox, mold or heavy metals, because all of these things add stress to the body. So, all of these things can be stressors. So this is why the stress less or just go to therapy might not work for you, because if you're working on the mental component, what about the physical stressors? What about the low B vitamins and the zinc? What about the gut infection that's adding physical stress to your body? What about the sluggish detox that's resulting in the buildup of estrogen? Those are the deeper layers we need to be assessing with mood swings, PMS, anxiety, and irritability. So how do we determine what labs you should be running to figure out what your specific root causes are? Okay. So the first thing is functional blood labs. And this is much different than what you're getting run at your doctor's office. So I mentioned already, like for example, a complete iron panel, which includes transferrin, serum iron, percent saturation, total iron binding capacity, and a ferritin. Those are a lot more than what your doc is running. A complete thyroid panel. So not just TSH, but we want TSH, T3, T4, reverse T3, and antibodies. Copper and ceruloplasmin, which ceruloplasmin is like an active form of copper. We want to look at zinc and B vitamins, homocysteine, which essentially is a methylation marker, and total blood histamine. Those are just some of the labs that I run that doctors typically won't. Even functional providers oftentimes won't run these labs. But when I'm running functional blood, I'm looking at even more than this. These are just common ones that I see that are missed that are so important for all of these potential root causes. And then the other thing I want to note too is that normal doesn't always equal optimal. So when I'm looking at blood labs, I'm looking at, what is optimal functioning for women's health. So I'm looking at I want to be proactive versus reactive, versus doctors typically aren't flagging things until they're a disease state, until you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, until you have diabetes. For example, like a conventional or normal TSH is anything from 0.45 to 4.5 on blood labs, while my optimal range for women is closer to 0.8 to 1. So a huge difference. Fasting insulin is another big one. Conventional considers normal 2.6 to 24.9, whereas optimal metabolic health for me is closer to 4.5 to 6. So that's why I have a lot of women who come to me and they're like, I've had the blood labs run, I've had all these things done, but I still feel off. And I'm like, let me go through your blood labs with you. Like, let's pull them up. Let's go through them. And I'm like, nope, this is off to me. Nope, this is off to me. Nope, this is off to me. But they weren't flagged by their doctor because they're looking at what's normal for men and women before it's flagging a disease state versus what's optimal for your health, for you to feel your best and prevent diseases from happening. The next thing is a GI map stool test. So this is a comprehensive stool test that looks at good versus bad bacteria. If there's any overgrowth of, or infections like parasites, yeast, H. pylori, digestive markers and digestive function. So looking at that stomach acid. And if there's any gut-driven inflammation, leaky gut, poor estrogen metabolism, etc. Hair tissue mineral analysis, or what is referred to as the HTMA. This is my favorite for looking at overall mineral patterns because it shows what's happening inside the cell for the past 3 months versus blood labs just show that moment in time and what's happening outside the cell. And I like the HTMA too because it can show us even more than just minerals. It can show us how are your adrenals functioning on a cellular level? How is your thyroid functioning on a cellular level? What's your stress response? Do you have any, heavy metals? For example, in my HTMA, I had high uranium, which what the hell? Where did that come from? Probably my water at some point in my life. So I needed to use specific binders to get rid of that uranium, but I would have had no clue I had uranium exposure, right? So it's all through your hair. You can tell that. It's pretty cool. And then other tests is needed. I love running the iodine test. That's something for clients in my VIP coaching program. We run that most of the time. And this is a urine iodine test. So unfortunately, the HTMA can show us some signs of low iodine, but it doesn't test iodine specifically. We use the Hakala labs for that. And then, other labs that I run occasionally, but they're not my first line of defense, are going to be a Dutch hormone test, mycotoxin testing if mold is suspected. So, final words, hopefully you're having light bulb moments, whether you listen to this whole episode or you went through, just certain sections and listen to ones that you're currently dealing with. But all of these things are so interconnected. We can't just focus on the gut. We can't just focus on just, balancing hormones. We have to look at the whole picture and all of those things within the deeper layers of the iceberg, right? So hormones are the tip of the iceberg. That's what we're seeing. But what's causing those hormones to be imbalanced to begin with? And that's where, using these functional blood labs or using these functional labs is so important because it can help you identify exactly what your root causes are and give you a clear plan of action for how to address them. So all that being said, I'm so excited to offer a new free resource for you that I created specifically for this reason. So it's called the Root Cause Roadmap. And it's for those of you who were put on birth control to fix things like acne, painful or missing periods, PMS, mood swings, Or maybe you recently got off birth control and you're experiencing those things with a vengeance. Or again, if maybe birth control isn't part of your story, this is still really helpful to identify what's causing your symptoms. If you're, tired of being told those things are just normal, your labs look normal, and you know that something deeper is off, and you're tired of wasting time, money, and energy trying to figure out on your own without any support, inside this free guide, you're going to get clear explanations of what your symptoms are actually telling you. Things like mineral depletion, gut issues, thyroid dysfunction, blood sugar and copper imbalance, things that we talked about today, the most common hidden patterns I see in women coming off birth control, and a clear roadmap of what needs to be supported so your period, skin, and mood can stabilize naturally. And then a breakdown of those functional lab tests I talked about to identify your unique root causes so you don't have to continue guessing or chasing symptoms. So this is the exact framework that I use with my private coaching clients, now in a simple, easy to understand guide that you can save and reference and come back to. So that link will be in the show notes below. You click it and download it for instant access. And I hope it provides insight and clarity and hope. Again, I hope a lot of light bulb moments were coming off and women listening to this episode being like, oh my gosh, like this makes so much sense. Or, oh my gosh, I thought there was more to this than that. Because it's never your body failing you. It's never just in your head. There are always things that are going on underneath. You just need the right person and the right test and the right support and the right plan to help correct them. So I would highly encourage you to download that root cause roadmap. Again, it's completely free. There's also some additional resources in there and some additional trainings depending on what specific symptom you are experiencing. So you can dive in even deeper into those. Because again, today was just a really surface level overview. So definitely check that out. And if you would be so kind to leave me a review if this episode was helpful, or a comment on YouTube, send me a message on Instagram. It's really helpful to know that this episode resonated, as well as helps get the podcast in the eyes and ears of more viewers, more listeners who need this information. So thank you so much. And until next time, stay nourished.